Have you ever put your child to bed and then spent the next hour scrolling through Instagram, comparing yourself to the mum who made homemade organic baby food while you reached the jar? This guilt connects us all as mothers in ways our own mums never experienced. In today's episode, I'm breaking down why this feeling has become almost universal for our generation. I felt it with formula feeding after struggling with breastfeeding, and still feel it when checking emails during playtime. Research shows an astonishing percentage of mothers experience this regularly, with social media being a primary trigger. Let's unpack what's really happening here. Have you ever noticed how your mind is constantly running through a checklist of things your child needs while simultaneously wondering if you're doing any of it right? That mental catalogue never stops. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about whether I've packed enough snacks for the girls. When I'm with my girls, I'm mentally planning tomorrow night's dinners or remembering that it's library day tomorrow. This constant background processing has a name. It's called the mental load. The mental load is this invisible work that mothers carry, like hauling around a weighted backpack that only you can feel. It encompasses all the planning, organising, remembering, and worrying that nobody else sees but takes up enormous space in our minds. It's remembering your 5-year-old needs new shoes, that your 3-year-old's favourite teddy needs washing, and that dentist appointment that you've been putting off. It's the endless administration of family life that typically falls to mums, weighing on us throughout each day. What's fascinating is how dramatically this mental load has expanded for our generation compared to our mothers. My mum certainly worried about me, but she didn't have apps tracking my developmental milestones or WhatsApp groups sharing articles about how certain types of play might boost brain development. She faced less pressure to create educational experiences at home or document every childhood moment for social media. A friend recently showed me a note on her phone listing all the things she feels she should be doing with her children. 37 items. 37, ranging from more outdoor play to introducing a second language to limiting screen time. And each item represents an opportunity to feel inadequate daily. This invisible work creates perfect conditions for guilt because there's always something more we could be doing. Last Tuesday, I found myself sitting on the bathroom floor at 11 o'clock at night, scrolling through sensory play ideas on Pinterest after my girls were asleep. Despite being exhausted after a full day of work, dinner preparation, bath, stories and laundry, I still felt inadequate because we hadn't done enough enriching activities. The mental load extends beyond remembering tasks. It's the constant questioning. Is she eating enough vegetables? Should I be doing more sensory play? Did I respond properly to that tantrum earlier? This mental burden connects deeply to our sense of identity and self-worth as mothers. Many of us grew up in achieving in education and career areas where effort typically equals results. But motherhood doesn't work that way. You can do everything right and still have a child who won't sleep, who won't eat dinner, or has a meltdown in the supermarket. When your sense of self is so tied to feeling competent and in control, this unpredictability can feel like personal failure. Research confirms what many of us feel intuitively. A 2021 study found that this constant mental juggling significantly impacts maternal well-being, with mothers reporting high levels of stress, anxiety, and even depression related to managing the never-ending mental to-do list. Interestingly, the same study found that the physical tasks weren't causing the most stress, but rather the weight of responsibility and decision-making accompanying them. I experienced this when my first daughter was born. The physical exhaustion of night feeds was challenging, but what truly wore me down was the constant decision fatigue. Is she crying because she's hungry or tired? Which sleep technique should I use? Is this normal development or is this concerning? Every day brought hundreds of tiny decisions, each potentially impacting my child's future. Here's what I've come to understand. This overwhelming feeling of inadequacy isn't a personal shortcoming. It's a systemic issue affecting most modern mothers. We're applying productivity principles to an essentially unpredictable human experience. We're trying to optimize childhood, which was never meant to be optimized. We're trying to excel at something that historically was never meant to be done alone. The mothers in my community describe this same experience, the feeling that their brain is never off duty, that they're constantly falling short of impossible standards. One wakes up at 3 a.m. making mental lists of things her children need. Another described feeling like she's failing at everything a little bit all the time. If so many of us feel this way, perhaps the problem isn't with us as individuals. Understanding this mental load, naming it, recognizing it, is the first step to addressing the guilt. When we see that what feels like a personal failure is actually a predictable response to an impossible situation, we can be kinder to ourselves and question whether all these mental checklist items truly matter. Next time you're lying awake, worrying if you've done enough today, ask yourself, whose standard am I measuring against? Is it my child's needs or an internalized expectation from somewhere else? Chances are your child isn't lying awake wishing you'd made homemade Play-Doh instead of watching Play School. But where exactly does this overwhelming sense of not being enough actually come from? To understand that, we need to look at how motherhood has changed over generations and how what was once a community experience has become increasingly isolated and individualized. Did you know that for most of human history, raising children was never meant to be done by one person alone? It's true. Before our modern lives, motherhood looked completely different than it does today. When I think about how I parent my girls compared to how my nana raised her children, the differences are striking. In traditional communities, motherhood wasn't an isolated experience. Children were raised in extended family networks with grandparents, aunts, uncles, and older cousins actively participating. I've heard of the older generation tell stories about living just streets away from their sisters and mum, their homes becoming shared spaces throughout the day. The children would dash between houses, playing tag with their cousins in back gardens, while adults divided cooking, cleaning, and childcare duties. Neighbours knew each other's families' routines, which mums baked on Tuesdays, whose washing day was Wednesday, and creating an informal rota of support that functioned without scheduling. When my mum was growing up in the 70s, she remembers playing outside until the streetlights flickered on. Children created elaborate games using nothing but sticks and imagination, building dens beneath hedgerows and solving their own disputes while parents got on with household tasks or simply enjoyed a cup of tea in peace. The boundaries between homes blurred as children moved freely between friendly houses, accepted at any kitchen table when they were hungry. Now compare that to my life with my girls. We're lucky to only live on the other side of town to my parents, but my husband's family all live on the other side of the world. We know a few families on our street, but everyone juggles demanding work schedules that leave little room for spontaneous gatherings. If my daughters want to play with friends, I coordinate with other parents via text, schedule precise times, drive them there, and typically stay to supervise. The prospect of sending my 6-year-old out to play independently feels almost radical today. This shift has happened remarkably quickly. In just 2 or 3 generations, we've moved from communal child rearing to an isolated, intensive model where mothers are expected to do everything, often while working full-time jobs. We're attempting to replicate the collective wisdom and practical support of an entire community while maintaining careers, relationships, homes, and personal identity. Today's support systems require planning rather than being woven into daily life. Research confirms that this isn't merely anecdotal. Community structures have fundamentally changed. Families disperse for employment opportunities, housing costs push young families away from established support networks. And digital communication substitutes for in-person bonds. Meanwhile, our expectations of good parenting have intensified dramatically. Consider how childhood freedom has diminished. Activities once considered normal now provoke anxiety. My friend recently admitted feeling nervous allowing her 8-year-old to play in their front garden alone, worried about neighbours' judgments. Modern mothers must not only keep children safe and nurtured, but optimise their development at every turn, providing educational experiences, limiting screen time, serving nutritious meals, ensuring physical activity, monitoring emotional health, building confidence, and documenting it all perfectly on social media. When my eldest turned 3, I spent weeks crafting elaborate birthday decorations and activities, staying up late to perfect everything. My mum watched my stress with confusion and she said, "We just had sandwiches and cake in the garden. Nobody expected more." And it made me realize the standards have escalated dramatically while our support systems have diminished. Understanding the historical context helps explain widespread maternal inadequacy. We're attempting to replace entire communities with individual effort, then criticizing ourselves when perfection proves impossible. Mum guilt isn't a personal failure, it's a predictable response to an unsustainable situation. This realization was liberating for me. Recognizing that my inadequacy feelings stemmed from modern motherhood's impossible structure rather than personal shortcomings helped me release some guilt. I began recreating village-like support by joining parent groups, connecting with neighbours, and being vulnerable about needing help. I've built some amazing relationships where, we exchange last-minute childcare and share meals during overwhelming periods. While not equivalent to having family next door, it creates patches of community in an isolated landscape. We're all navigating a system that wasn't designed for our success. Recognizing that mum guilt stems from attempting alone what was always meant to be shared helps reframe our struggles. And speaking of struggles, our mothers never faced, let's explore how social media has created an entirely new dimension of comparison that previous generations of mothers never encountered. Have you ever found yourself scrolling through Instagram at 2 a.m. while feeding your baby, only to feel worse about your messy house and unwashed hair after seeing a mum of 3 who somehow maintains a perfect blow dry and a colour-coordinated playroom? I know I have. There I was, milk stains on my pajamas, scrolling through images of mums who seemed to have it all together while I could barely remember if I'd brushed my teeth that day. Our mothers and grandmothers certainly compared themselves to others. That's human nature. But the difference is stark. My mum might have compared herself to a neighbour or someone at the school gates. Her comparison pool was limited to perhaps 20 or 30 other mothers she actually knew in real life. Now, we're comparing ourselves to thousands of carefully curated images of motherhood from around the world, constantly available day and night. Social media has become a funhouse mirror for motherhood, distorting our perception by stretching some realities while shrinking others. Each time you follow a parenting account or search for baby products, your feed gradually fills with perfect-looking families and immaculate homes. These algorithms serve content that keeps us engaged, and unfortunately, nothing maintains our attention quite like feeling slightly inadequate while searching for solutions. A new mum who searches for sleep training tips suddenly sees an endless parade of peacefully sleeping babies in pristine nurseries, making her own exhausted reality feel exceptionally difficult. I remember my eldest daughter's second birthday vividly. After seeing countless elaborate celebrations online, I felt genuine pressure to create something spectacular. I spent weeks planning, bought special decorations, ordered a fancy cake, booked a petting zoo, and stayed up late cooking and prepping the food, all while juggling a 4-week-old newborn. When the day arrived, my daughter was so overwhelmed, overstimulated, and avoided the guests by hiding on the stairs with some cake. Yet I still posted that one decent photo I managed to capture, hiding the reality. And I wonder how many other mums saw that image and felt inadequate about their simpler celebrations. Even when we logically understand these images are carefully selected and heavily edited, they affect us emotionally. I can remind myself that the mum with a spotless kitchen is only sharing her best 30 seconds from an entire day. But at 2 a.m., exhausted and emotional, that rational thinking disappears. I'm left feeling like everyone else is managing better than me. Studies confirm this experience, showing a clear correlation between increased social media use and heightened maternal anxiety. The more time mothers spend on platforms like Instagram, the more inadequate they feel about their own parenting, a finding that makes sense considering what we're actually seeing online. The highlight reel affects The highlight reel effect damages mothers particularly severely. We're consuming thousands of different families' best moments simultaneously. One mum shares amazing home-cooked baby meals without showing the kitchen chaos. Another posts about successful potty training without mentioning sleep struggles. Someone else showcases beautiful sensory activities but never reveals screen time. Together, these highlights can create a composite perfect mother who simply doesn't exist. I experienced this when pregnant with my second child. I followed several mums of two on followed several mums. I followed several mums of two online. One brilliant at crafts, another cooking amazing meals, one with a beautiful home, another making time for fitness. Gradually, I believed I needed to excel in all of these areas once my baby had arrived. This standard was completely unrealistic, yet constant exposure to these different specialities created an impossible benchmark. Social media transforms extraordinary things into seemingly ordinary expectations. Elaborate birthdays, perfect photo shoots, hand-painted nurseries, and daily educational activities, once occasional special events, now appear to so common that they seem like minimum standards. The everyday reality of motherhood, involving mess, tears, and simply surviving the day, isn't deemed interesting enough to share. I had a revelation at the park with my daughters, probably last summer. My phone died, and without pressure to document anything, I experienced the moment differently. I wasn't considering angles or lighting for a potential post. I was simply present and enjoying their laughter at the slide. Later, I realized no one would know about a lovely afternoon except us, and that felt perfectly fine. Understanding social media's mechanics helps break its grip. Recognizing that algorithms deliberately show content designed to make us consume more, compare more, and buy more allows us to see these platforms as manufactured environments rather than reality reflections. So why does every mum feel inadequate? We're constantly exposed to thousands of different mothers' best moments, creating an impossible standard. No real mother simultaneously excels as a chef, craft expert, designer, fitness enthusiast, fashion icon, and mindfulness guru while raising perfectly behaved children. Yet social media creates this illusion. Next time you're caught in that comparison spiral, remember, you're seeing carefully selected moments from thousands of different families, not anyone's complete reality. The mum with the beautiful Instagram feed has her own struggles and messy moments. She simply doesn't share them with her followers. What if I told you that having access to more parenting information has actually made motherhood harder, not easier? When I had my first daughter, I thought I was incredibly lucky to have so much knowledge at my fingertips. My mum had one baby book and her mother's advice. I had thousands of websites, apps, podcasts, books, and social media experts available 24/7. But I quickly discovered this wasn't always the blessing I thought it would be. As millennial mothers, we have unprecedented access, expert advice, research, and information about child development. Within seconds, we can pull out our phones and find scientific studies on sleep training methods, detailed nutrition guidelines, milestone checklists, and expert opinions on everything from screen time to potty training. We know more about brain development, attachment theory, and the potential impact of parenting choices than any generation before us. The problem is we're drowning in a sea of contradictory advice. Every wave brings another expert opinion that crashes against the last, leaving us gasping for clarity. Take sleep training. One expert insists it will damage your child's attachment, while another claims avoiding it will lead to long-term sleep issues. Early reading improves literacy, according to one study, while another warns against academic pressure too young. Every normal parenting decision becomes fraught with significance because we simultaneously know too much and never enough. I remember sitting up late one night when my eldest was about 4 months old. She wasn't sleeping well, and I found myself just swept into the undercurrent of conflicting sleep advice for hours. The gentle parenting expert said responding quickly to her cries was essential for secure attachment. The sleep training experts warned that not teaching independent sleep would harm her development. Both sides had research to back their claims. Both made me feel like making the wrong choice could have lasting consequences. I ended up in tears and I was just confused. And that's when I started convinced that whatever I chose would somehow damage my daughter. Our mothers and grandmothers navigated parenting with different compasses. They relied more on intuition and community wisdom. My grandmother often tells me, we just got on with it. No one was telling us there was a perfect way to do things. And they weren't bombarded with studies on everything from the optimal amount of tummy time to the precise wording to build emotional intelligence. They made decisions based on what worked for their family and what felt right to them without the constant pressure to optimize every aspect of their children's development. What's particularly challenging is how quickly official recommendations shift beneath our feet. The advice for introducing solid foods changed between my first and second children just 2 years apart. Safe sleep guidelines, screen time recommendations, and car seat standards transformed so quickly that many mums feel perpetually behind, constantly discovering that yesterday's right way is today's outdated approach. This information tsunami creates a devastating decision fatigue. When faced with endless options, each backed by some expert or study, we become paralyzed by the potential consequences of choosing wrongly. Each decision feels monumental because we've read about all the possible impacts. And unlike previous generations who made a decision and moved forward, we can always find information suggesting we should have chosen differently. I saw a program that highlights that taking on too much advice can make parents doubt themselves and feel guilty that they're doing something wrong. So the more parenting information I consumed, the less I trusted my own instincts. Simple decisions became anxiety-producing events as I wondered whether I was optimizing my daughter's development or inadvertently harming her. The modern emphasis on evidence-based parenting compounds this problem. While it sounds sensible, this approach can undermine maternal confidence when the evidence itself is contradictory or limited. Not every parenting aspect can be quantified, and not every child responds to the same approaches. Yet we feel tremendous pressure to follow the evidence, even when it doesn't align with our individual child's needs. I hit breaking point when my eldest started kindy. After reading countless conflicting articles about school readiness, socialization, and educational approaches, I just felt frozen with anxiety over, which school to choose. And I realized then that all this information wasn't making me a better mum. It was making me a more anxious, less intuitive mum. So what might help us navigate these overwhelming waters? When I started limiting my sources of information and turning back into what felt right for our daughters and our family, I felt a noticeable decrease in my anxiety levels. Mum guilt often stems from the cognitive dissonance created by exposure to too much contradictory information about the right way to parent. We're constantly pulled in different directions by experts and studies, unable to follow all advice simultaneously, yet feeling we should somehow synthesize this knowledge into perfect parenting. Now, let's look at another major shift that's intensified guilt for our generation: the changing landscape of work and motherhood. Did you know that working mothers today spend more time actively engaged with their children than stay-at-home mothers did in the 1970s? It's a startling fact that highlights how much the expectations of motherhood has changed. Despite working more hours outside the home than previous generations, we're also expected to spend more quality time with our children. This means being physically present, emotionally available, educationally engaged, and creating enriching experiences. For millennial parents, the economic reality has shifted dramatically. When my mum was raising children, it was still fairly common for one parent, usually the mother, to stay home. My grandmother's generation saw this as the norm, but for us dual income households, it's a necessity. Rising household costs, childcare expenses, and the general cost of living mean most families simply can't survive on one income anymore. Yet despite this economic shift, the expectations around motherhood haven't adjusted accordingly. They've intensified. We're expected to be fully present, engaged parents, while also being committed, productive professionals. We're attempting the impossible, embodying both a 1950s stay-at-home mum and a modern career woman simultaneously. The research confirms this experience. A 2016 study with 255 parents found that working mothers may experience more guilt related to work interfering with family life compared to working fathers. When dads work late, they're dedicated providers. When mums do the same, they're seen as neglecting their children. These double standards add another layer to our guilt. The having it all narrative compounds the problem. Stories about CEOs who never miss school events or executives who rise at dawn for exercise, prepare elaborate meals, excel at demanding careers, and maintain perfect self-care routines don't inspire. They create feelings of inadequacy because real life rarely resembles these portrayals. Workplace policies and cultural attitudes haven't kept pace with modern family realities. Flexible working remains a concession rather than standard practice. Childcare costs are prohibited. Parental leave often reinforces traditional gender roles. School schedules conflict with standard work hours. And during the pandemic, these challenges gained visibility as working mothers simultaneously manage childcare, homeschooling, and full-time employment. Briefly, it seemed this might trigger lasting change. Yet many workplaces quickly reverted to the pre-pandemic expectations and abandoning potential lessons about flexible, compassionate approaches. Individual strategies can help navigate these tensions. Being transparent about priorities with employers and children creates clearer boundaries. Differentiating between urgent work matters and those that can wait helps establish priorities. Learning to be fully present rather than constantly multitasking improves both work quality and parenting. But personal strategies address symptoms rather than the causes. Working mothers face unique guilt challenges because we're trapped between systems demanding complete dedication to both career and intensive parenting without structural support. Until workplaces, economic policies, and cultural attitudes align with modern family realities, this double bind will continue generating unnecessary stress and guilt. But here's what's really interesting. This guilt isn't affecting certain types of mothers exclusively. You might think that highly educated, successful women will be protected from these feelings of inadequacy, but the research shows something quite surprising. Isn't it strange that some of the most accomplished, educated women often struggle the most with feeling like they're failing as mothers? I see this pattern constantly among the women in my life. You might expect that women who've succeeded in education and their careers would feel more confident in their parenting abilities. They've proven themselves capable in challenging environments. They've earned degrees, led teams, managed projects, and solved complex problems. Yet these skills rarely transfer smoothly to motherhood. The research and my own experiences reveal a fascinating paradox and understanding why this happens and can be incredibly freeing. High-achieving women typically apply the same perfectionist standards to motherhood that propelled their professional success. The mindset that earned top marks or promotions, setting high standards, putting in extra effort, being meticulously prepared, often backfires in parenting. The attitude that hard work leads to excellence leaves us feeling perpetually inadequate when applied to raising children. I remember when my eldest was about 6 months old and she wouldn't nap in her cot despite my careful research on sleep training methods. I approached it like a work project, reading experts, creating a plan, implementing it consistently. But my daughter hadn't read the same books. She simply refused to follow my carefully created schedule. And I felt utterly incompetent. Someone who could manage complex work projects and tight deadlines, unable to get a tiny baby to sleep when she was clearly exhausted. This experience has highlighted a crucial distinction. The skills that drive success in structured environments seldom translate to parenting's unpredictable nature. It's like an Olympic sprinter suddenly being dropped into the wilderness orienteering. In our professional lives, effort typically equals results. Motherhood operates by entirely different rules. You can do everything by the book and still face unpredictable outcomes. There's also the issue of measurable outcomes. In education and work, success has clear definitions: good grades, completed projects, promotions. But success in motherhood is subjective, long-term, and often invisible day to day. We can't measure whether we're succeeding as mothers in concrete ways, which leaves achievement-oriented women feeling adrift. For women accustomed to control, motherhood's chaos can be particularly destabilizing. The loss of structure when carefully planned days fall victim to nap refusals, unexpected illnesses, and growth spurts can deeply challenge those who've built identities around competence and control. Research on perfectionism shows how these traits manifest specifically in maternal guilt. Studies find that perfectionist women experience high levels of parenting stress. They set unrealistic standards that feel like they're failures when they inevitably fall short. Imposter syndrome becomes particularly acute in motherhood, where no formal qualifications exist to reassure us what we're doing is right. I see this dynamic play out in different mothers groups. Often women with impressive CVs express the most doubt about their mothering abilities. They question their instincts and worry constantly about mistakes. Years of professional expertise suddenly count for little in a role where they feel like novices, a transition both jarring and confidence shaking. The challenge intensifies when friends and family say, "You're so organized, smart, capable, you're going to be great at this." These comments create additional pressure. When you're used to mastering challenges through effort and intelligence, accepting that aspects of motherhood simply can't be mastered in the same way becomes particularly difficult. Understanding this paradox offers liberation. When I realized my feelings of inadequacy weren't because I was bad at being a mum, but because I applied inappropriate standards of measurement, a weight lifted. I saw that motherhood wasn't another test to ace or project to perfect. It was a relationship to nurture with all the messiness that relationships entail. Why do even the most educated, successful women struggle with mum guilt? Because motherhood operates by different rules than achievement-oriented systems. Success in motherhood isn't about control or measurable outcomes. It's about connection, adaptation, and growth for both parent and child. Women who navigate this transition successfully recognize and adjust their expectations. They learn to value the skills that matter in parenting: flexibility, emotional awareness, patience, and resilience, even when they weren't prized in their professional lives. They find peace with unpredictability and measure success through moments of connection rather than achievements to tick off. So now that we understand the complex system creating mum guilt, let's talk about how we can actually start breaking free from it. What if I told you that the first step to managing mum guilt isn't trying to be a better mum, but rather changing how you respond to the guilt itself? This was such a revelation for me. I spent months after my first daughter was born constantly trying to do more as a mum, thinking like if I made more nutritious meals or did more developmental activities, the guilt would go away. But it didn't, because I was treating the symptom, not the cause. The truth is, guilt is somewhat inevitable in the current system of motherhood we've been discussing. With all the social media pressure, information overload, and impossible standards, feeling guilty at times is a normal response. So rather than trying to eliminate guilt entirely, which is probably impossible, we can learn to manage our response to it. Our instinct is to believe the guilt, to let it define us, especially when it touches on our deepest fear that we're somehow harming the little people we love the most. So let me share some practical strategies that transformed my relationship with guilt. First, identify your specific guilt triggers. I kept a simple note on my phone where I quickly jot down when guilt spiked during the day. After a couple of weeks, clear patterns emerged. I felt most guilty when scrolling Instagram before bed, or when I was working my late shifts at the hospital and not getting to kiss the girls goodnight. Recognizing these patterns made them less powerful and helped me prepare for or avoid these situations. Second, clarify your core parenting values. For me, they're kindness, honesty, creativity, and resilience. When I'm clear about my values, I can use them as my measuring stick, not someone else's Instagram feed or the latest parenting book. When guilt appears, I ask, does this align with my values? Often, the things I feel guilty about aren't actually connected to what I truly value for the family. Third, practice self-compassion. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about speaking to yourself with the same kindness you offer a friend. My friend had felt terrible for losing a temper with a toddler. I reminded her she was human and helped her gain perspective. Yet with myself, my inner dialogue was harsh. Learning to speak to myself with compassion changed everything. Fourth, create your information sources. I did a major cleanup on my social media feeds, unfollowing accounts that left me feeling inadequate and finding ones that felt honest and supportive. I also limited myself to 1 or 2 trusted sources for parenting information. This immediately reduced my daily guilt levels by eliminating constant comparison and information overload. Fifth, approach guilt with curiosity. When you feel guilty, try asking, what's underneath this feeling? Is it fear? Exhaustion? Am I trying to meet someone else's standard? This turns guilt from an overwhelming emotion into useful data. A mum in my mother's group shared another brilliant approach, keeping a done list rather than a to-do list. So at the end of each day, she writes down what she accomplished, however small, sang 3 nursery rhymes, noticed her son's new freckle, and managed to shower. This helps her see what she's doing right rather than focusing on imperfections. When we recognize guilt as an information signal rather than a moral failing, everything shifts. Those feelings of inadequacy don't have to define us or our experience of motherhood. Guilt in small doses can actually guide us towards what matters, but these approaches prevent guilt from becoming the dominant emotion in our parenting experience. They help us respond to guilt with wisdom rather than letting it control us. But how do we move beyond just managing guilt to actually creating a new model of motherhood? What if we create our own definition of successful mothering that actually makes sense for our individual families? What would motherhood feel like if you measured success by your own standard rather than someone else's? I often wonder this when I'm having one of those days when nothing has gone according to plan. The morning when my eldest refused to put on clothes for school. My youngest had a meltdown over the wrong color cup, and I've already checked my emails before even getting out of bed. On days like these, Instagram, perfect motherhood feels like it's happening on another planet. Creating your own personalized definition of good enough mothering based on your unique family is essential. What works for the mum with a perfect looking Instagram feed might be completely wrong for you and your children. My daughters need something different from what your children need. My capacity and circumstances are different from yours. So why would we measure ourselves against the same impossible standard? Last Tuesday, my 6-year-old spilled juice all over her school uniform 10 minutes before we needed to leave. And of course, there was no other clean ones in the wardrobe. As I frantically dabbed at her jacket, I just caught myself thinking like, oh my gosh, every other mum would have handled this calmly. Every other mum would have had a stack of uniforms cleaned and ready to go. But they aren't raising my child. I am. And in that moment, I chose connection over perfection. And we just laughed about this polka dot uniform day. And she arrived at school smiling and a little sticky. This real life moment illustrates what is called good enough parenting. This approach emphasizes that parents don't need to be flawless to raise well-adjusted children. What children actually need is consistency, responsiveness, and a secure base from which they can explore. I read an article that suggests that children thrive with parents who are good enough, and that mistakes become valuable learning opportunities when handled with repair and reflection. It takes courage to reject external standards and trust your own instincts in our culture obsessed with optimization. We're constantly bombarded with messages about the best way to feed our babies, the optimal amount of screen time, the right developmental activities. Deciding to step back from all that noise and say, this doesn't work for my family, means risking judgment from others and battling our own internalized expectations. Over the past 5 years with my girls, I've created my own motherhood narrative focused on connection. For me, this meant accepting that I'm not a naturally crafty mum. I tried with my first daughter, Pinterest boards full of sensory activities and homemade Play-Doh, but I found it incredibly stressful. Now I've accepted that while I might not excel at elaborate craft projects, I am good at silly kitchen dancing, making up bedtime stories, and really listening when my girls talk. These moments of connection matter far more than picture-perfect activities. Research shows that maternal well-being is more important for child outcomes than perfect parenting practices. Studies demonstrate that when mothers experience lower levels of stress and anxiety, their children tend to exhibit better emotional regulation, social skills, and academic performance. Taking care of your own mental health isn't selfish. It's essential for your child's development. When we model self-compassion for our children, we're teaching them valuable emotional skills. My daughters watch me navigate challenges, how I speak to myself when I make mistakes, how I prioritize my needs sometimes. When I show them that I'm human and can be kind to myself anyway, I'm giving them permission to be imperfect too. Redefining success transformed not just how I felt about motherhood, but the entire experience. When I shifted from trying to be the perfect mum to focus on being authentically present, the pressure lifted. I started enjoying our time together more. I could see what my specific children needed from me rather than what social media said all children needed. Attachment theory underscores what really matters in parenting: a parent's sensitivity to a child's needs, consistent responsiveness, and providing that secure base. Elaborate birthday parties, educational toys, or Instagram-worthy homes don't appear on this list. Secure attachment, fostered by attunement and connection, is associated with greater resilience, self-esteem, and the ability to form healthy relationships. So how can you stop comparing yourself to those carefully curated mums on Instagram? By recognizing that the true measure of successful mothering isn't visible in photos. It's in the secure attachment you're building with your child. It's in the thousands of small moments of connection that no one else sees. It's in how your child feels in your presence, not in what your motherhood looks like to others. When we look at the bigger picture of what really matters in raising children, what truly counts is the relationship we're building and the emotional foundation we're helping them establish. That foundation isn't built through perfection. It's built through presence, responsiveness, and the courage to be imperfectly human with our children. The truth is, mum guilt isn't a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a symptom of a system that places impossible demands on mums without providing adequate support. When I feel that familiar wave of guilt washing over me, I try to remember that what matters isn't the perfect Instagram photo, but the connection I'm building with my daughters. Every generation of mothers has faced different challenges. There's only your way, which evolves as you and your children grow together. When guilt creeps in, pause and ask yourself, whose standard am I measuring myself against? Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Real Mummy podcast. Remember, every mum's journey is unique and you are doing an amazing job. Please be sure to head over to our website at www.realmummypodcast.com to stay up to date with the latest episodes and dive into our recent blog articles filled with even more wisdom and stories. We absolutely love connecting with our listeners, so don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Real Mummy Podcast. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, and become part of our supportive mum community. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you got a topic you want covered? Do you have a guest you'd love to hear from? Reach out to us through our website or social media. Your input is invaluable and helps us to create the content that matters most to you. Thank you for being part of the Real Mummy podcast family. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind to yourself, and remember, you're never alone on this journey. You've got this.